So next, we move on to how does it actually work? In an everyday environment, these features that I mentioned before, what do they do? Are they useful? Will you use them? Any design flaws that might cause problems over time, that sort of thing. So I feel like I have to start with what I feel like is the most important part of this controller, the two programmable shoulder buttons. In games such as Skyrim, Fallout, even Cyberpunk recently, I call them look and looters, where you find yourself looking around your environment a lot, picking up loot from bookshelves and rubbish piles or broken boxes or whatever the case may be. And previously you'd have to take your finger off the look button and then walk towards the object if you weren't close enough already, waiting for it to give you the prompt to pick up the item. Some games make it easier for you when you're close enough, but some games are quite pedantic as far as getting right close to the object themselves. And this allows you to almost do it like PC gamers would do it, where you can be looking and strafing at the same time as looting or picking up. So just make sure that you program one of these as the required pick up or loot or grab button, and you'll never have to take your fingers off the sticks. I think that's the important take home part about these buttons here, is that most games will have pre-programmed buttons for the two triggers and the two bumpers, which you can't really get away from. But having these two as one of the face buttons means that you never have to take your finger off the sticks to use the face buttons, which is an inherent design flaw of a console controller, because you use the one stick for strafing and the other stick for looking, so you have to take your finger off one of those sticks, which is usually the looking button or the looking stick, to then press a prompt on the face. So if you can think of a use for that, it will be amazing. It's to use a cliched word or phrase, it's a game changer. It will change how you play certain games. You can make this a jump or a block or a dodge or a dive. You can find a lot of use for this in Dark Souls-like games, where it can be a parry or a block or one of the face buttons, so you never have to be taking your finger off the sticks to make another input. You can find so many uses for these buttons here. I feel like once you've started using them, you cannot actually go back to a controller without these buttons here. So easily the standout feature of the controller. However, to program these buttons, you have to use the Razer app, which is obviously a free app that you can get on the Xbox store, but it does mean that you have to manually go into the app to change what these buttons are. Whereas on the Wolverine Ultimate, there was a on the fly remapping button, so you could press one button, press the programmable button, and then press the button that you want to program. Then it would automatically do that without you having to minimize anything. You can do it in the middle of a game. I find that I do that quite regularly. I often forget to switch the profiles when I go from one game to the other. So I'll open up whatever game it is, Pro Evolution Soccer, I've been playing a lot lately, and then I press what I've mapped this to be, and I expect it to be something, and it's not, and then I get caught out. So thankfully on this one, I can just quickly change that. But when I was testing this controller, you actually have to minimize the game and go into the Razer app to change what these settings are. So it's a bit of a drawback, but I feel like the advantage of having these two buttons vastly outweighs that at all. The other feature that you'll find yourself using are the trigger stops, which change so much of quite a few games. If you haven't used them before, it obviously reduces the actuation distance of each of the triggers. So in games like a first-person shooter, you don't have to go all the way down to trigger a fire, and it allows you to rapidly fire more often and quicker. Things like racing games don't really benefit from that, because you want the full control of movement over the range of the trigger there. But games that can use trigger stops, you'll notice a difference if you can use them. The adjustment of the audio balance on the face is a nice addition, but I also feel like it's a bit of a basic addition at this stage in time, where entry-level controllers are offering these adjustments over here. Obviously, as I've mentioned, it has to have the cable, the headset that you're using, to really benefit from this, because a wireless headset cannot be controlled with this built-in game balance here. but it's nice to have it there in case you're using a cheap set of headphones, or you plug in your cell phone headset just to get some game audio. The stumpy grips, for me personally, are not great. I feel like they're too short, and I'm not getting I feel like my pinky isn't even gripping onto anything when I'm holding it. It's just kind of folding onto itself. I'm just using these these 4 fingers to hold the controller, really. The pinky's not doing much. So personally, I prefer the length of this grip, where my pinky is actually gripping onto the bottom of the controller, whereas on this one, my pinky feels like it's just sliding off the bottom there. So it's not the most comfortable for me personally. I think I do have maybe slightly bigger hands than some, so it might not be for everyone, but the textured grips do provide a lovely solid grip, even when it's slightly damp. It's quite humid today, so the controller is a little bit slippery, but it provides a lovely grip compared to the smooth finish on the first generation of controllers. The menu and the start button, yes. These 2 buttons, while looking nice and sleek on the front of the controller, they're nice and small, and they've been pushed to the top of the controller to give it a nice clean look. It's a bit difficult to actually press them quickly when you're gaming, especially the menu button over here, or the select button, I think I should say. That's what it's actually called now. You try and move past the left stick, and you kind of move the left stick to get to that button. It's not very ergonomically designed, I'd say, from the design choice as far as getting there easily without looking. The start button is decent, but it feels small and like an afterthought. Personally, I feel like I could have done better in the center of the controller here. Would have been easier to get to without impeding either stick, but that's also a personal decision. As far as everyday maintenance is concerned, I'm a little bit curious, because this green strip is not an overlay on the controller. It is a cutout. So over time, this is going to start accumulating some dust, some dirt, some, maybe chip dust. If you guys eat next to your controllers, it's going to get some dead skin cells, including the D-pad and the sticks. They are not removable, as I've mentioned before. The only way to clean this is to take the controller apart, which is not an easy thing to do, as I learned from the Wolverine V1, or just to make sure that you try and keep it clean every time you use it, because these recesses and these openings on the side of the stick and on the D-pad will definitely get dirt and dust and anything else inside of them, which will eventually ruin the mechanisms on the inside. So it's worth noting that it might not be the most practical controller to use every single day, unless you're one of those people that likes keeping your hands clean, that likes to keep your controller clean after you've used it, because it doesn't seem like it's going to be very easy to take this apart to clean it once it's been used for a few months or a year or two, and maybe the sticks aren't responding or the buttons aren't responding. You want to take it apart, blow it out. It might not be the most practical as far as that is concerned. All in all, there have been some curious decisions that they've made, but the actual functionality of this controller, it's so hard to overlook the good things, including the programmable buttons, the trigger stops, and these nice tactile face buttons. But the few things that I do feel like are negatives kind of also counteract the positives in a way. So unfortunately, this gets a 14 out of 20, while not being a massive compromise or massive penalty. I feel like there were a few things that if they'd done it slightly differently, it would have got much higher marks. The not least of which would be the on-the-fly remapping button. I'm not sure if anyone from Razer is going to be listening to this, but guys, an on-the-fly remap button would be so much nicer than a share button. I don't understand why an entire button was devoted to something you can do by pressing the Xbox button and pressing Y. 2 button pushes. They've devoted a whole button push to here. Whereas if you want to reprogram these 2 buttons, you have to open an app and take 30 seconds to a minute to go and reprogram that. They could have made this button on the fly remapping button and saved everyone a whole bunch of time. So personal gripes with a few decisions. Again, a 14 out of 20 for the functionality, the overall daily use of the product.